We'll be honest, here at Skillcapped we weren't very excited when Lillia the Bashful Bloom was announced. But we were tasked with creating a guide nonetheless to save the community from clueless inting Lillias on their team. We quickly realized that Lillia is one of the most fun champions Riot has released in quite some time, and some of us at Skillcapped are already calling ourselves dedicated mains. Lillia is primarily a jungler and is super fast, like Ferrari fast. She can prance around the enemy while all they do is watch as she's able to easily one-shot with a clean combo. On top of that, she can 1v9 group fights with her 5-man Zoe bubble while skipping in and out at a speed that makes Hecarim look slow. Alright, as with any new champion, let's first cover her abilities. For her passive, whenever she hits an enemy champion with an ability, they will receive a dot dealing 5% of their maximum health as magic damage over 3 seconds. However, this effect does not stack, it just refreshes every time you apply it. Her Q functions very similarly to Darius' Q. It does AoE damage around her in a circle. Hitting the outer part of the circle will double the damage, with half of it being true damage. Her Q also comes with a passive movement speed effect. Whenever she hits an enemy with any ability, she'll get a movement speed buff that stacks up to 5 times. Maintaining this passive up at all times will be crucial to your success, and we'll cover some tips on how to do that a little later on. For her W, she has a short range skill shot. After Lillia winds up for a bit, she smacks the ground dealing damage. Those caught right in the center will take triple the base damage of the spell. Her E is basically a bowling ball. She throws a seed that damages and slows whatever it collides with. The fun part is that it will keep going forever until it crashes with either terrain or an enemy unit. Lastly, remember how all her abilities apply her passive? Well, for her ultimate, she auto-targets whoever has her passive on them and puts them to sleep after a brief delay. If you wake them up, they'll take a nice chunk of damage. Try to keep in mind that it works kind of like Zoe Bubble. If you don't wake them up, they'll take no extra damage. I know exactly what you're thinking. But wait, does this mean that if you land a cross-map E that you can sleep someone across the map? Yes, it does. So, while it's likely that Lillia could be played as a top laner, we do believe that she'll primarily be a jungler. Later on in this guide, we'll cover some specific tips for her initial clear for jungle or laning for top, but for now, let's break down her playstyle and what she excels at. Lillia's movement speed is the defining factor in her kit. Being able to weave in and out of fights to gain the upper hand is crucial for her success. For example, her speed makes her incredibly potent at spacing out melee characters. With proper spacing, it is a living nightmare trying to latch onto her as any immobile melee champion. Her movement speed also hard counters any champion with skill shots. The enemy team could have Faker on it, and it wouldn't matter, as hitting champions moving this quickly with skill shots is nearly impossible. This makes her a bit different from most of Riot's latest releases. Typically, newer champions rely on shields, self-healing, or living host mechanics to stay alive and not get blown up. Lillia, on the other hand, will have to rely on general game knowledge to be effective. Knowing how to properly space around the enemy team and avoiding their critical abilities will be the difference maker in whether your team is fawning over you throughout the game or wanting to report you for being useless. Of course, there is one problem. Being a mid-rangey speed machine does not prevent her from getting obliterated by other mid-range champions who have either high burst damage or powerful lockdown capabilities. Thankfully, there's a very simple solution to this problem, which we'll cover in the build section. As for her playstyle, we recommend that you play very proactively on the map. Lillia resembles champions like Olaf or Lee Sin. They are incredibly powerful and obnoxious when they're ahead, but if they fall behind, it becomes very difficult to accomplish anything. That being said, even when behind, Lillia will still be really useful with her AoE CC potential. But ideally, you do want to be playing proactively and very aggressively throughout the early game to get ahead. The reason she's supposed to be such an aggressive champion is because she can out-tempo probably every other jungler in the game at the moment. Again, her movement speed is a huge factor behind this. She has very easy time dueling most junglers, who are unable to get away from her without wasting their own flash. On top of that, if you're always moving faster than every other jungler, then you can gank way more lanes than they can while also farming more camps. Her ability to move around the map so quickly is the biggest reason to play Lillia, and why her main role is most likely going to be jungle. Not only should you be playing very proactively in the early game, but come mid game, Lillia is excellent for setting up picks with her global E. Think of this like an Ash arrow on a much shorter cooldown. Throw it out whenever you have the chance, as there's almost zero downside to doing so. If you happen to tag someone, press your ultimate, and just like that, you've set up great picks and engages for your team. Most of Lillia's kit is rather straightforward, so there's only really one combo that you need to learn. In general, your W sweet spot is very hard to land on people without some form of CC. To guarantee your full damage rotation, just put someone to sleep with your ultimate before using your W on them. It's so easy to pull this off that you can even do it on 900 ping. As for some tips and tricks, there's a couple of things you should know about Lillia. One, just like Darius, you can Q flash. You can use this to catch players off guard with her sweet spot damage. Of course, as we've repeatedly stated throughout this guide, Lillia's main strength is her MS. We highly recommend constantly being aware of anything you can hit with an ability to retain your passive as you move throughout the map. Your E is particularly excellent for this. As you come in for ganks, you can just throw your E at something guaranteed to hit to retain some passive stacks. For example, in this clip, Lillia throws a very good E towards Soraka. Yes, if it lands it will slow her, but at the same time, even if Soraka jukes, then it would still hit this minion, retaining some of her passive stacks, letting her set up the gank that much more easily. And lastly, whenever you recall, you should always be looking to use your E from base to potentially snipe vulnerable lanes. There's a few more angles for different landing locations, but we'd only expect dedicated Lillia players to learn every single one. But you should at least know of one angle to hit every lane, so that you can always try to hit someone whenever you recall on Lillia. Okay, let's break down your initial clear, which is going to be very important to get you going. Lillia actually has one of the healthiest clears in the game. This is mostly possible for two reasons that you'll need to keep in mind. One, her 325 attack range. She's not quite a full-fledged ranged champion, but she definitely has much higher range than most melee characters. And number two, her passive movement speed from her Q. Combine both of these traits and you have a camp kiting machine who excels at clearing her jungle. Unfortunately for all the Udyr mains out there, this does mean that you'll need proper jungling mechanics to play her. She absolutely cannot stand still while clearing her jungle. Unfortunately, her strengths here are also a bit of a weakness. Lillia will struggle with clearing both Red and Gromp early on. Gromp is obviously a ranged camp, so you can't really kite it. And Red buff is randomly a fast boy, who happens to catch up to her faster than every other camp, so there's not much kiting to be done there either. So regardless of what route you do, only do these two camps if you have a smite charge available, so you can burst them as quickly as possible. Alright, here's your preferred route that you'll want to take on either blue or red side. Start out at red. If your leash sucks or you get no leash, smite it. As we said, it's one of the worst camps for her to do. Then do Krugs. We may have neglected to mention this, but Lillia gets movement speed whenever she hits an ability on an enemy. Try to finish camps off with a Q so that you retain your movement speed as long as possible while moving from camp to camp. Then do Raptors, Wolves, and Blue. You should only have to use one potion to end this route with full HP. You'll get to Scuttle right when it's spawning, take it for level 4, and from this point you can go to either top or mid and gank with full passive stacks, very likely catching players off guard with how fast you are. There is also the opposite route, where you do Blue, Wolves, Raptors, then Red, where you'll use your smite charge, and then into Krugs. This route is slightly weaker, because you do lose most of your passive stacks going from Krugs to Scuttle, but the route is still fine. Obviously, with both routes we're avoiding Gromp. Not that you can't do Gromp, but it will cost you a lot of health to do so. Most of the time, it should be the one camp that you avoid during your initial clear. We mentioned earlier that Lillia has problems dealing with mid-range champions who can either burst or lock her down. Let's talk about builds so we can solve this minor issue. Your first item that you will always build is Runic Echoes, then your tier 2 boots. Your second item should be either Liandry's Torment in most cases, or you can go Rylai's if the enemy team is full of melee champions who you want to spam slow. This is important, you only get one of them, not both. After you have your jungle item and one of those AP items, then you go pure situational tank items. This will solve a lot of Lillia's natural issues without really sacrificing hardly anything at all. You may question, why not go AP defensive items like Banshees or Zhonya's? Well, the problem with those is that as a mid-range champion, Banshees gets popped instantly and is rather worthless. Zhonya's, on the other hand, is incredibly anti-synergistic with Lillia. Remember, your main defensive tool is being super fast to space out your opponents and dodge their abilities. Putting yourself in stasis just allows your opponents to potentially set up a kill on you when you come out of it. And like we said, you're not sacrificing anything by going raw tank items. Lillia after 1 or 2 AP items will almost always one-shot any squishy target with her full combo. She has crazy high base damages and doesn't need that much AP to function properly. Against tankier team compositions, Liandry's plus your passive are great for dealing constant percentage based damage. You can technically do more overall damage in a team fight by going tank, because you're not as restricted in when and how you go in. You can just stand in the middle of multiple people and spam out your Q, being incredibly obnoxious the whole time. Of course, we do want to acknowledge that we can never be 100% sure of the most optimal build until thousands of players are trying her out on live servers, but we do genuinely believe that this will likely be at least close to what her optimal build path ends up being. As for your runes, you'll want to run this Dark Harvest setup. Your minor runes should be Scaling CDR, Adaptive Force, and Armor. We recommend the CDR Flex rune since Lillia does benefit from CDR, but doesn't really want to build it that much with her core items. For your secondary tree, you actually do have a few options. If instead you want to run the Ignite Smite combo to deal with sustained junglers like Olaf or Lee Sin, then you can run the Sorcery tree instead. Or if they have an absurd amount of CC, you can run the Precision tree for tenacity as well. Lastly, we are aware that a Phase Rush build may possibly become the meta for Lillia, but upon testing, it felt rather weak in our opinion. She already has so much movement speed that it felt overkill, while Dark Harvest actually helps her scale quite well. Very briefly to cover top lane, if you do want to play her up there, then you'll want to treat her as more of a lane bully. Run this rune page and your build will be fairly similar to jungle Lillia. 2 AP items into full tank. You'll ideally want to pick her into melee matchups. That's really what this champion excels at punishing the most, and if you rush Ninja Tabi's, you'll probably be able to just kite and chase most champions around in top lane, making them regret not banning her. Playing her top doesn't really change much about what we've discussed this entire guide. You become fast and tanky and deal lots of damage at some point. So you may have noticed our sweet Spirit Blossom design for today's guide. That's all thanks to our collaborations we've been doing with our friends at Riot's LoLEsportsla. Definitely check them out to watch the guides we've made together if you speak Spanish. And don't forget, if you're serious about improving at League of Legends, then you have to check out skillcapped. We create over 10 brand new guides every week that are just like this one. We also have a direct pro video coaching service along with an improvement guarantee when actively using skillcapped. Be sure to sign up and start climbing today. Alright everyone, let us know how you do with Lillia in your ranked games. We'd love to hear what you think of her. Is she balanced, OP, needs a buff, too hard to play? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.